Good morning to everybody, and welcome at lunch with NIC, a lunchtime webinar focused on project management, focused also on leadership attitude. This is Tony Ciccardi, PMI volunteer that will introduce the webinar, the speakers, and will address also the debate in the question and answer session at the end of the webinar. Before we start the event, I would like to give you some information on the webinar. If when you subscribe to the event, you have inserted your PMI ID, will be charged in your personal dashboard in 1 or 2 weeks from today. And another issue related to this information, if during the talk you have some question, you can write it in the chat. You can write it not in the chat. It is better to use the Q&A box. So the speaker at the end of the webinar will try to give the answer according also to the remaining time and the time that we have available. Sidita is also fluent with Italian, so if you want to do the question in Italian, you can do. We will do the webinar in English because we have some participant that that could be that is present because also the webinar is in English, and so it is accessible also for him. So we will respond in English, but if we will give you the answer in English, but if you want, you can make the question in Italian. Now we can go straightly to the subject of the webinar, that is leadership. When we talk of leadership, the first side we have to investigate is ourselves, in our attitude, our capabilities, in our strength, our weakness. So if we are able to lead ourselves, we are able to become an example for others. So the first step is lead self. Today we focus on lead self with Sidita Asi. So now I want to introduce Sidita. She is a founder, mentor, and speaker at Project Management and Operational Excellence Interest Group. She holds a master in organizational leadership on an executive certificate in management and leadership from MIT. Sidita is also a member of PMI NIC, so she is a sister of us, and chair and mentor at the Human Development Division of American Society for Quality. So, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a great pleasure to pass the floor to Sidita. Please, Sidita.
Well, thank you, Tony, for this very broad and nice introduction. I try to do what I can, and I feel like we all need to do what we can and try to improve ourselves, as topic says itself. It is a good time to spend the time, especially because it's the beginning of the year and a lot going on, especially the last few years. And I feel like we do need to take the time to reflect on ourselves, on our dynamics that surround us. And it's always good to share that with other people and see what they have to say as well and what they will trigger in their own self-reflection time before we go out there and try to lead others. It's very simple to just put a manager hat and go out there and have these nice big titles and then fail because we're dealing with people and not just computers here. So I appreciate being back here. We did have a chance to have another webinar a couple of months, I think about a year ago. And it's always interesting to see how organized and how engaging the events that PMI, especially Northern Italy, is doing. I did spend about 10 years of my life in Italy. When I was 18, I moved there for my undergrad and then stayed there for work. And then I moved to US and stayed there for my master's and worked for about another 10 years. So I've gone through a lot of change in my life myself at a personal level and professional educational level. And it was interesting to come back after about 20 years in Albania. And I did have to go through a lot of self-reflection the past few years that I've been here. I continued to work remotely, and so the international work experience kept going. But at a personal level, it did feel like a whole different world for me coming back after 20 years. So I hope everyone here today is taking the time to just let's reflect. I know it's lunchtime, and I know it's Fratelli time in Padova. I spent this week in Italy. It's always nice to go back, and I think like that country is golden, and that's something that I can never get away from my own being now. It became a part of my identity. But it's also very nice and easy to get distracted by the beauty of it. So I hope we take the time to really reflect and not just get distracted, because there is a difference between reflection and getting distracted. From the image before that you were seeing from my own bio in there, I put it personally intentionally, because if you see on the right side, then you see me getting involved everywhere. I'm pretty keen towards volunteering when it comes to professional networking and trying to share knowledge and see what we can learn from one another. But then again, adding to it work and everything that goes on with our personal lives can get very easy to get distracted. Rather than on the left, you'd see the me where I take my own solo trips, and I love that, and take the time to reflect on that. So I hope you take this few minutes. We don't have a lot, to see what can this trigger on you, or to take some key action items that you might follow up later on as you take the time to work on it, because it's not just something that you learn in 20 minutes. It's something that it's a journey, and I hope everyone gets something from it. And you do have a chat box in here, which PMI and Tony right now are trying. So feel free to share your own experiences. I hope you feel this is a safe environment. No one is getting like a right or wrong answer, so don't feel this is the time to just learn some math in there and have the right answers. So please use the time as you feel fit. I was thinking to share this time by structuring it into three main questions. So the first one, which is the key one in this topic for today, is what does leading self mean, and what does leading self mean to you, I would say. Because this is something that's also very personal, as I shared my own experience with moving all over the places and going through so much change. I feel like you might have your own dynamics, which you have been going through. So if you want to use the chat box, feel free to use it all the time. Unless there is a question, you can use the question and answers. Tony was saying, you can share your own experiences saying, what does leading self mean to you? The next question that I will follow up, which is a follow-up question to that, we'll try to respond is, does it change over time? Even the concept itself, what does it mean to you? Did that change over time as you think back? And the third one, but not least, is how do we plan for it? Do we even plan for it? So that's something that we'll try to cover in this few minutes as somebody is taking their coffee or lunch break or whatever that will be for everyone here. I do see people are from different places, so that's a value add for this side of topic today. So feel free to share that experience, and hopefully that will trigger something in somebody else. So when it comes to what does leading self mean to you, and I think back on my own personal experience as well, but also from some theory standpoint and a Japanese masters here, it's a really interesting story where he was trying to provide some tea, basically to fill a teacup to another coach, which actually trying to learn. And this master called NIC, he kept just throwing more tea and more tea and more tea and overflow, basically. And the master was there also getting to learn something from him. He was like, why are you keep going? Like, it's already full and you're overflowing this one. And the response kind of hit me. It was like, well, unless you empty yourself from what you have been filling yourself, either consciously or unconsciously, then you will not be able to learn something new. So it's really important to actually stop, reflect what we have been surrounded and impacted by, and then be ready for this new knowledge that we need to gain or prepare ourselves for something different. So that's something, just a reflection point, but I feel like that's very impactful. If we think back and if we think that our journey, basically, it starts with self. If I think of self as a child in us, the DNA on how we were born. So there is a self in there that does not change, and that is our DNA. And then we have the upbringing. So each of us has a different upbringing, which can be a geographical, some sort of impact, the way our parents were modeling us. So even if you are from the same area, maybe you had a different school environment or just family upbringing role models. So all of that does impact you, and it kind of starts becoming a part of you and a part of your identity. So we do need to be aware on how that has impacted us. And then we could growing and moving and going around, but we also have a context. And for me, the context has mostly been changing because of geographical moves that I've had to have, but it doesn't have to be just geographical moves. So it can be even like a cultural standpoint when you move from one team to another and you are within the same organization, or the culture that comes with, it's very much different, and that might impact on how you move around and how you lead yourself around. So what is key here is really to be aware of this journey. And as this child keeps growing and moving towards these dynamics that might become part of his identity, or some of it might not be part of his identity, but he's still surrounded by these dynamics, then this child is growing and moving towards some sort of different dynamics. But then sometimes, as you know, the fight or flight response tends to bring this child back to just want to leave, just want to go back to his safe environment. Whereas it might be other times where this, I call it child, but it still has the DNA that has in there, just wants something familiar. So it's not going all the way back to the child part, but it's going back to something familiar. So maybe the step before that. So just going back to, like this week, for example, I went back to Bolzano. I had some things going on there, which I had pending since last year because I worked there for a couple of months. And as I moved there last year, everything was new. It was certain parts were challenging for me because it was very pretty to see, but not very dynamic professionally. And I came from Boston, so it was very hard for me to fit professionally there. But then I moved back this year, last week, and it was so familiar to me. So I just felt comfy and enjoyed every single day of it. And it was the same place. And so it does matter at what point in time you're going, what was your prior experience with that, what were you looking for? So this week I didn't go there to move there. Definitely, I just went there to deal with some paperwork. So for me, that purpose was enough. And that's why I experienced it in a much more pleasant way than I experienced it last year. So these are things that we need to be very aware of and to decide and own this environment. This is why in the fourth little circle in there, you do see that the colors actually do represent, the blue one does represent the DNA, so what becomes part of us, which keep changing as we change identity, as we are impacted consciously or unconsciously. So the hope here is actually, the goal is to own this environment. So what you see in orange basically here is the dimensions and the system that we are surrounding ourselves with, and we want to hold the hand of this child and actually own that instead of letting us impact us unconsciously. So we would like to have a balance between what this child is always going to try to go back to somewhere more safe, which is part of our nature, and us owning the dynamics that we have around, so leading ourselves before we impact other people that we have to lead as we move towards leading teams. We have this concept about leading self, leading teams, and leading organizations in American Society for Quality, which is, as Tony was mentioning, one of the professional organizations that I chair, the Human Development and Leadership division of it. And we have built the whole body of knowledge around these three categories. And we do start with leading self, and then the next one will be leading teams, and then we'll raise the awareness and go all the way to leading organizations. So thus, these three dynamics are very, very important. And we hope that today we're just starting to trigger something in us, and before we move to next topics. So what dynamics do we need to be aware of when we are thinking about leading self, to try to respond to that question that I had before? So what does the leading self mean? It does mean to lead our thoughts. So to be aware, first of all, of them, to take the time to be aware and get to know ourselves and observe without judging, and then lead those thoughts, because those are million and thousand of thoughts a day. So we do need to be even aware that even the thought is there doesn't mean that we need to do something out of it. So we have to be prioritizing where we spend our time. We do need to prioritize and hopefully move towards some sort of improvement. That's key. And then, the point here is we lead the self and we need to be proud of ourselves, but at the same time, we have to be very careful between being aware and improving ourselves, but not with a goal to take credit. The point here is to go to this selfless altruism of leading others. Once we have learned and we have improved, and this is a continuous journey when it comes to improving and leading ourselves. So it does have to be a focus towards personal growth without going out there with a flag, then, hey, I'm so proud. Like, be proud, but be humble. That's key. And as we move towards the areas basically of where we can focus more on leading self, we don't have a lot of time, but we can say that there's a whole bunch of theory out there about emotional intelligence. As you know, the dynamics there are about self-awareness, but then management. So first step is becoming aware, and then you manage self, and then you move towards the impacting others. And you do need to be resilient, to take the time, as we mentioned before, reflect, but also know what are our values and what are the values of the surroundings that we put ourselves with. Because if we are against those values, then that's something that maybe we shouldn't even be in there, because if we are just putting ourselves in a place where those values are not something we want, then that will lead to conflict, and that's something that we can't manage, because the root cause is the impact that these values are having on us, because they're not in alignment with what we want. And if we think about where we can lead ourselves, we can lead ourselves if we think about our own well-being, the time we take to just relax and work on our body and mental health. We can even try to practice something even in your own house, the family dynamics that you have going on, and try to lead the time and the way you communicate and relate to those people. And then of course, the leading self would be taken into a workplace environment and see how you impact other people as well once you better lead yourself. And it can be a society, community. How do you relate to people around you, or the societies that you put yourself into, as well as, of course, your financials, which is a bit more tangible when it comes to leading self. So as we move to the next question, which is okay, now for me, this leading self means this specific thing. And again, I invite you to either have a question or comment, or just share what leading self means to you. But does it change over time? And this is a question I had to myself, because as I was preparing for this webinar for the American Center for Quality a month ago, I realized that leading self to me was something that really changed over time, in the maturity where I was at with myself, the awareness I had about myself. And as Tony Robbins says, what matters here, even though this leading self might be changing over time, and you might be frustrated if you think back and say, I didn't manage myself very well in the past, as long as you are making progress, that's what makes people happy. So it's not about what you achieve. It's really about seeing yourself making progress. My background is in Lean Six Sigma continuous improvement. And to us, making progress is key. That's what we live for. We know that there is no perfect world, but continuous improvement, operational excellence is founded towards the improvement and baby steps. And the same thing if we think about Agile and Scrum methodology, which we did speak last year, that is also incremental bites that we are actually delivering as we deliver value to the client. And what can change? So what can change when we think about leading self? To me, personally, the driving force, what drives me changed over time. If at my early start of my career, about 15, 20 years ago, I was going towards everything, pretty curious person. I would go, anything I see new, I want to learn, and I would go out there. So I was going and running after everything that was so shiny. Whereas later on, then I had like, I want the polar star, I want the shiniest one. I wanted US because that's where the best is. And I didn't experience that before. I just was hearing about it, and then I'll just go and run towards it and get it. So it was this high achiever type of personality, which I still have. I'm just a bit more aware, more humble, more trying to balance what's really, really matter worth spending the time versus just going because I can get it. I knew I can get it if I put myself into always studying a lot and achieving so much and used to success. But then I realized with time that I do need to put everything in a system that is the right system for me. So not just run all over the place or the shiniest star, but run towards something that makes sense. I'm more reflective. I take my time, my solo time, reflect on myself, on my own failures. I'm more open towards negative feedback. Before I would be like negative, no, something is wrong with you. I work in continuous improvement. So I'm just always having the good intention. And now I'm more open into what's not working and what could I do differently for that to work better. So it's a much more healthy environment to be around. And I am happier, even though I found myself that I have many years that I need to improve. And somehow this makes me even more happy that I'm in the right place and working in the right direction. These are some, and I think Tony will share the presentation, are just a couple of books that I would recommend reading, and then that might trigger in you something, but at least these are some important reads that I have had in my life that did impact me. And I won't stop in this one, but that's something that for you to share. So as I said, the direction for me changed. As I said initially when we thought about a child, so if you think of a child is being led by parents or whoever is raising that child. And then somehow we used to just go into jobs, so we are in leading roles, and not because you become a manager you are prepared to lead people. Unfortunately, people go into leadership roles just because they have a promotion or a higher title, but doesn't mean they know how to lead people. They might have the technical skills, and as we know, because we work with people all the time and we ourselves fail sometimes, the hope here is the direction of this leading self has to be from leading, being led to leading self, and then leading self and others, instead of just jumping into leading others without learning how to lead ourselves and be aware of ourselves. So it's about going from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. So open to looking into ourselves and being open to failures that we have, also open to feedback, as I mentioned, even the negative feedback. Pretty couple of interesting reads as well here, if you'd like to go through the slides later on. The method as well has changed for me. So I've gone from, as I was mentioning before, and some people might have a preference when it comes to what kind of method do you use for leading self. Some might have like CEOs wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning. I cannot do that. I've tried all the way. I'm all about leadership and leading self and others and trying different techniques. I just can't stick to one method. And for me, the structure, so structured way, it's not something that works for me. And I hope that other people feel that they can choose their own structure, and it can be a flexible one. So maybe I now try different things and I just pick whatever works for me. And as I accepted that about myself, I was happier and more relaxed. Otherwise, I started feeling like everyone has this clear structure, why I can't hold to it. Maybe there is something wrong with me. And so I was obsessing and going crazy around that one. I feel like we need to be healthy and careful, even when we are focused on improving ourselves, because it can really take you over. So we have the two extremes. One group of people who might not spend enough time and then find different ways to work on themselves, and they are totally unaware, and that's a very dangerous area to be in and to be around those people. But also the other one, which I used to be until very recently, about improving myself and driving myself crazy and not even spending my time a lot to even just relax and then take my time to even just travel and things like that. I had no purpose about just improving my mind and brain. So I was a very brainy focused type of person. And as I mentioned, unstructured one. So hopefully my idea is about being flexible, being agile, even the way we lead ourselves. So that will be something that will allow us more time to find what works for us, as the Agile methodology here, or even the Lean Six Sigma method already has as well. So how do you plan for it? This is another slide that I hope everyone can actually just go through it and see what works for them. There are a couple of resources that help me from a yearly perspective. At least I would say be open about learning what your values are, what you want to achieve, why is it important, and as you go through time, quarterly or weekly, have some sort of balanced reflection and see about these priorities that I had at the beginning of the year. If the year thing works for you, where do I stand? So with my volunteering, I realized this week that I was back in Italy, that I was running because I wanted to come to this webinar and be back. I came last night very late. When I put my PDU hours, I just recently renewed the PMP. I realized that I have way too many hours of these engagements and volunteers. Even though I love it, I do need to reduce, which should be the other way around. But so it is important to see and check it back with the prioritization of those areas that you have had, your role as a father, as a mother, as a friend, as a coworker, and see where you stand. Is that in balance with, and that balance might change, and that's fine. Just change that balance and change those priorities. So we do have only a few minutes left, so I'd rather actually open and see. This is just a question for you, or take a home sort of thing, and start reflecting on these questions and try to answer and see if you're taking initiative when it comes to leading self. So are you somehow right now waiting for other people to tell you what to do, or you're already taking action? Are you complaining, or you're just a person who basically has always a reason why something is not working or can be done? Are you reacting versus acting and being proactive? So Tony, I think we can open it to some sort of comments if there is one or two, or share other things that we have going on. I can be very easily found on LinkedIn, as I already mentioned, pretty active professionally when it comes to sharing our experience, volunteering as well. So if you have any question, you want to share something, feel free to reach out to me. That's me back in the mountains. I recently started falling in love with solo trips in the nature. So that's something that I hope everyone can find some sort of connection in each other's stories.
Okay, so a question. There is a question from Alessia. What is your advice in case you are aware of what you do not want to do, rather than what you do like to do?
Yes, so I might be a biased person here because I tend to just do what I want to do. Last year, after, as I said, 20 years coming back to Europe again, I quit jobs, about 2 jobs under pandemic, because they were not in line. And trust me, it's not that I'm a person that can live without a job forever. So we all have to put food on our table. But I did quit a job that was before the Italian one, a job in US that was not in alignment with my professional continuous improvement type of background. I realized that there is no growth opportunity there, not just like to get a higher salary and title, but really to do the type of job that my background and my passion is about, which is continuous improvement and project management, but always towards improvement. And I realized that there is, I did what I could in that group. So I didn't even voluntarily provide the value. I realized that there is no goal. I went all the way to VP to really understand where they're heading in the future, in the near future. Even offered myself to help them get what they were not having operational excellence department. So I even offered myself to create one. So I don't just quit right away. Like, of course, you use in a positive way, informal leaders. You don't always need to just go to your own manager. You can also go to people who have a positive influence in you and in the company. So you do all you can proactively and actively. Don't just like quit and wait for the company to just praise you and bring you a promotion, all of that. You do your own work. And then if there is no goal, then you do need to quit. And it took me a couple of months to find the other company, which was in Italy. And I did help them there. But as I said, professionally, I felt really locked in there. Unfortunately, this for me is still way too bureaucracy. Things are way too slow for who I have become now. And I felt like I would rather go away. Otherwise, they would tend to feel my frustration, and it would not be positive for any of the parties. So I even there try to design and hopefully train people for them to keep going on with that journey. But then myself, I need to remove myself away. So these are options, but always going back to what are my priorities. So my priority this year is to do less volunteering and things like that, not because it has to be paid, but really less work and more these journeys that I just travel, take my time to be a more healthy mentally place that I used to be because of high achievement, always changing countries and things like that. It does take time.
Okay. Thank you, Sudita. I have another question. You have talked about lead self as person. Do you think that there is also a lead self for organization? Is an organization as an organization a DNA, so we can consider a self, a lead self for organization? What is can you find the best methodology?
Yes. So this is key because we talk about, or especially like if you see comments on LinkedIn, this organization, and we say organizations are made of people. And there are these values of each individual, but also values of the organization. And unfortunately, many organizations talk about mission and vision, and they just post them on their website. But then you go within their organization, I've many times noticed that they don't live by those organizations. By those values and mission statement. So if an organization is creating this nice fancy mission statement, they do need to live by them and values, because if these leaders are not exemplifying, then with time employees will notice that they do have a character, they do have an identity or DNA, how we were going to call it, and they need to exemplify it. It can be just the role model of how they're behaving. It can be symbols that they use in the organization, across the organizations, even visuals, phrases that they put all over the place. So these are things that how they're on board an employee, how they actually make sure the performance review is not done once in a year, but it's the true both ways performance review and opportunities. Informal leadership like mentors have been used in some organizations to help the person grow and be in the right job. Sometimes I even had to, I did lead many teams that were informally not reporting to me, informally to somebody else, but at least even though I could not change their title and the job itself, in the project that was getting them involved, I could allow them to take some tests that some person like collaboration, and I would put them into more project management roles. Some people like just put me in a computer data, that's it, and I'll give them another task. We do need to find that marriage between this, what motivates an individual and what values that individual has within the team, and then again going a higher level across the organization. So that is key. We do have a DNA in the organizations as well, or in the teams, because that might change as well.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, the time has expired, so we are 4 minutes late, so we have to finish. If you can, I would like to thank you, Sudita, for this great explanation, great webinar. So I hope that everyone is as it was okay for anyone. So what I want to say that we next webinar will be 8 March with Silvana Castelluccio with Creatività Circolare. It will be in Italian, next one. So I hope that you have enjoyed in this webinar, and you will also participate to our next initiatives. The last slide, you can see the next slide. We have, you know very well, it talks about the PDU that will be charged automatically, and then if you have inputted the ID PMI. So we hope that it was okay for you, and if you have some comments, please send a mail to events@pminic.org. So thank you, Sidita. Thank you to all participants. Thank you to all participants.
Thank you.
For
Thank you, Sidita, and surely we have to organize an updating of your intervention, because 30 minutes really are not sufficient, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, arrivederci.
Grazie a tutti. Ci risentiamo. Buona giornata.
Bye.